Dr. Cooper, Andrea, you both know how popular our mailbag episodes are, right?
Yes.
Yep.
They're so popular. We have just been inundated with emails from those of you all over the world. And I'm guessing some of you are saying, I wrote 3 months ago. Where is my answer? How come Dr. Cooper hasn't read my email? Well, we've got a solution. I think you're going to love it. Dr. Cooper, tell us what the solution is.
I will. I'm so happy to have found a solution because I feel so badly for all the people that keep writing these wonderful questions and we just can't get to them all. So what we're going to be doing is a monthly live Zoom Q&A on Patreon. So it's going to be available to subscribers of our Patreon channel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Andrea, you do that on Patreon for some other shows.
I do it for a bunch
Tell
of people.
us more about what
Yeah.
it's like.
You sign up for this one. You sign up, and Dr. Cooper will answer a bunch of questions live, and you're going to get a lot of answers and great comments, of course, from Mark, from you and me. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to get a lot of really extra content that I promise it'll be worth it.
And if you've never done Patreon before, it's basically a platform for creators where you can incrementally support shows that you love. So if you go to patreon.com/fatsciencepodcast, you can check out, we've got a couple of different levels. One of the levels starts with a newsletter and the monthly Zoom call. The second level, which is a little bit more per month, actually involves a monthly Zoom call with providers. But anyone can subscribe to that one as well because it's going to be really good information.
Much more in depth.
Much more in depth. And just go to the Patreon platform, sign up to support the show that you love, and benefit from all of the perks. I think you're going to like it.
Hi, it's Dr. Emily Cooper. Are you a healthcare professional who wants to expand your clinical expertise and your approach to treating obesity? Beginning November 7th, I'm offering a 3-part, 20-credit live virtual course through the Diabesity Institute. This course will focus on science-based insights into diagnosing and treating metabolic disorders. I've treated thousands of patients over the past 25 years. Our clinics recorded their outcomes in a comprehensive database, and I've learned a lot that I'd love to share with you. If you're looking for clarity, a greater diagnostic understanding, and effective treatment strategies, for more information and for the official credit statement, visit fatsciencepodcast.com and click on the provider course link at the top of the homepage. All right, now to the show.
So, Andrea, back in the day, people were not very nice to Dr. Cooper.
No.
Were they?
No, they were very mean. They were very mean, and they called her a voodoo doctor. They said she was like crazy. She didn't know what she was doing. She gave us all kinds of weird drugs, like, why is she giving you diabetes medicine when you don't really have diabetes? What are all these drugs? They're for crazy things. They're for seizures. They're for things that you don't have. And she's doing weird stuff and giving you all these tests. What are all these tests? I don't understand. Why is all this happening? But hey, you're making all this progress. So I guess it has something. I don't know. It has something. It's working. I don't know. It's working. So I was like, with my doctors who I didn't like, but that's another story. I was like, well, I'm sticking with the program and I'm sticking it to you. So that's what happened.
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. Good to see you two.
Hello.
All right, on the show this week, from voodoo to mainstream, debunking diet culture in the age of GLP-1s. This is going to be fun. And before you say, wow, that's kind of an inflammatory title, it's not an inflammatory title. Let's go back in time. Andrea, I want you to set the stage. And then I'm gonna probe with Dr. Cooper a little bit about her story. But back in the day, Andrea, when other doctors were calling Dr. Cooper basically a quack, a voodoo doctor, take me through that experience. You had some pretty profound exchanges with physicians who thought this was complete nonsense.
Yeah, my doctor, who I didn't really like, but that's a different reason. It was an insurance thing. I had to go to a different doctor, but she was like, these tests, I don't know what these tests are. It's so many. Why so many? And what are all these drugs? You don't have diabetes. You're like a borderline case. Why is she putting you on this drug that's this weird drug, this new drug, Victoza, that like, you shouldn't be on this. Like, I don't know why she's doing this to you. I mean, it seems to be working, but, you know, why are you on this? And what are all these other drugs that Dr. Cooper had put me on for some other things with my cocktail? And one is like a seizure medicine. She's like, you don't have seizures. What's going on? And she's like, it's like voodoo medicine. I don't know what's going on. And I said, you know what? You stick to you, and I'm going with this because this is working, and fatty liver is gone, and that happened in like 2 months. What was it, like a month, 2 months, something like that, crazy. And like everything was getting better. And I was really unhealthy. You know, not totally unhealthy, but pretty unhealthy. My weight was crazy. I mean, from what I am now, I was like 200 pounds or more. There was more than 200 pounds on me, and things were happening. And she wasn't doing anything. And, also the no dieting thing. She was like, what? What? She's telling you to eat? What is going on here? And my gastroenterologist thought it was crazy. They all thought it was crazy. They all wanted me to go on diets. They wanted me to get gastric bypass. Like, it was just insane. And I was like, you know what? She knows what she's doing. She has lots of experience. And you guys just need to shut up. And I think that it was, in a way, it's like Dr. Cooper's trajectory in her career and like her career path sort of goes with a lot of her patients. It's like our persistence, her persistence sort of has the same path. It's like you have to stick with it and stick to your guns, and it's like the turtle wins the race. You know, we as patients, when you stick with it, you win. And I think that her knowledge wins and science wins. So I feel like it's the same.
Yeah. I think today, in this age of GLP-1s, a lot of providers are really jumping on the bandwagon because the results are undeniable.
Right.
These drugs work in the vast majority of people who take them. That's really not disputed at this point. But I want to go back in time, Dr. Cooper, because I think exploring this part of your origin story, for lack of a better phrase, I think is important, because I think a lot of doctors are still struggling with the idea that diets don't work, and they still believe in calories in, calories out. But I think the turning point for you was, I don't think it was a day, it was a very sort of slow evolution in your treatment of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients. So take me back, Dr. Cooper, when did the light bulbs first start going off in your mind that this science of metabolism was not anything like what traditional medicine thought it was?
Yeah, you know, I can actually remember the patient where the light bulb really did go off. So it's weird that you ask that, because it is sort of like a light bulb moment. What happened was a doctor sent me a patient. And actually, it was an endocrinologist that sent me the patient because the patient's weight was elevated and she wanted her to be doing an exercise program. And at the time, I had been doing a lot of work with athletes, and I had all the metabolic gas exchange systems, you know, to test their fitness and to help put them on exercise programs with exercise physiology behind it. And I had, at that point, been working a lot with athletes and then also with patients who had anorexia nervosa, because working with the athletes brought in more people who had eating disorders. And then, so, and all of it because I had this fancy equipment. This was, believe it or not, like way long ago. We're talking about, I can even remember the clinic setting I was in, which was way back around 1999. 2000, 2001, right in that area of time. And I had this gas exchange system, and I was big into these spreadsheets, and I was big into the exercise physiology and how metabolism affected exercise performance. So we would do this testing to help people with getting their heart rate zones, to know that they were exercising in a way that was improving their fitness and giving them those pointers. And along with the testing, it gave you the calories that you're burning per minute of exercise, and then also at rest. And not only that, but the fuel that you're using, carbohydrates versus fats, and equations in there to determine protein burning and things. So we were, I was pretty high tech at that time, and even by today's standards, that's quite high tech. And so I got this referral it was a new type of patient for me, because normally before that I was working with athletes and people with this anorexia and stuff. And this patient came in, I was supposed to put her on an exercise plan, and I saw on the testing a lot of similarities with the patients who had anorexia, but she had a high weight. So then I thought, oh, that's not right. And so then my first instinct was, you shouldn't be exercising because you're not burning fuel appropriately, and things are just like, there's something wrong. Your body doesn't want to burn this fuel, and that's something we see in our anorexia patients too. And so then I started looking at her lab work, and it turned out to be very similar to the patients with the anorexia. So where the hormones that regulate your metabolism they were in a position of like energy conservation, like you would see in anorexia. And by this time, it was a little further, because I'd been doing a lot of this, and so it wasn't far enough to measure all the things we measure now, but there were enough indicators that I was seeing that it was very similar. And so I started seeing more and more patients like that over time. But this particular patient, so my advice to her was to actually not go on this big exercise program, but to eat more food to help restore her metabolism, to perk it back up, and to do some physical activity, but not at the point of these like hard workouts and stuff. And so then I remember calling her doctor about this. And that was the first time that I got really yelled at and hung up on by a doctor. So I'm just saying.
What did they say?
She thought I was crazy. All I was trying to say is that I was telling her about the VO2 max and the heart rate response and and all of these markers that I was seeing. And she said, I don't know about that, but this is ridiculous. She just said I was ridiculous, that I didn't want to put this person, I was recommending not to have this person do these heavy workouts. I was recommending that they eat more. And she just thought I was nuts. And I was trying to explain to her the science behind it, but she was so argumentative, and it got to such a heated point that she literally hung up the phone on me while I was trying to explain. So, and and this is why it's so vivid in my mind, the particular patient, because that might be why it was kind of traumatic, actually, when I think about it. Because then I remember holding the phone, and I literally remembered the patient, and I remember her test results and everything way back then. And I remembered this doctor yelling at me and hanging up on me. And I'm just sitting there holding the phone, like in the mid-sentence of trying to explain why this was connected. So
but what's interesting about this, Dr. Cooper, is that you've been treating anorexic patients, where the brain is being told we're starving, which was actually true.
Yep.
But then the same hormonal markers appeared in an obese patient.
Yes.
And this obese patient's brain was being told we're starving.
Yeah.
And so it was storing calories, right? And so
right.
Doesn't
and
that
she
that
had
sort of
been starving. I mean, she had been. They had put her on these diets, and so it wasn't even just that maybe there was some glitch to start with. She had been put on these restrictive diets, and so who knows if that's what was causing all this impairment at the time. But then it made me look closer at things. And so then I really wanted to see more of those kind of patients because I was like, Oh, this is the key to understanding metabolism, because it's not just these extreme cases of people that literally are in, literally starving and have lost significant amount of weight below a healthy weight, but it's affecting people at a high weight who've been on these diets. And at the time, I wasn't as knowledgeable about the fact that some people with high weight just have those imbalances even without diets. So I was thinking it must be the diets that are causing this. So then, once I had a lot of patients in that category, I had, started really measuring the metabolism and stuff like that. And before that point, though, I was seeing some people and I was trying to do that crazy, well, it must be just you need to eat like this, you need to exercise like that. And I was using my spreadsheets for that. And I thought the problem was that no one was like really dialing in the numbers well enough before. And that's why it wasn't working for people. That now I'm going to dial in these numbers because I'm actually measuring their metabolism and all of this. And we had a group of people, tracking that. And as I've mentioned on this podcast before, it seemed to work in the short term, but then it seemed like it's backfiring. Things were really going wrong. And so all this was kind of all happening around the same time frame. And then very soon after, we were able to start measuring these key hormones that I was reading about. So this is what happened. So just so people understand, the reason that I'm recommending against these diets is because I saw all this stuff. So that caused me to go and look for explanation in the research. It's not that I'm cherry picking research. Some people will say, well, you cherry pick this research. You pick the things that support what you're thinking. But that's not really true. What happened was I saw a problem, so I was looking for the reasons that it was happening in the science and the literature. Why was this happening? And that's what led me to a whole world of metabolic science that really wasn't getting attention. And then from there, I kind of started developing like a matrix of, if you see this kind of problem, what kinds of things do we have access to that could improve that? And if this hormone is low, is there anything known that could raise it? If that's a beneficial hormone. If this hormone's high and it's a negative signal, is there anything that we know of that could lower it? And so I just start creating this whole matrix. And it was very wide and broad, and I studied and studied and studied this area.
When she says studied and studied, it really means studied and studied, because I've seen like the types of paperwork and books that she has, and it's a ton.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Dr. Cooper, what was the first GLP-1 that you prescribed, and was that a game changer in your mind?
That's a great question. That one was Byetta, which was exenatide short-acting. So that was the first one that came out in 2005. And in 2005, another one came out by the same company, and the brand name was Simlin, and it's pramlintide, which is synthetic amylin. So Byetta is the GLP-1, and Simlin was amylin. And those two medications were really, shown to be helpful because those hormones were helpful. But in the very beginning, I didn't just start prescribing them. I consulted we had a local endocrinologist that I've mentioned before on the podcast, and she was very supportive of our work that we were doing. So she was one of my only real people that I could talk to about the excitement of it, and she was excited about it. And
she didn't hang up on you.
She didn't hang up on me, and she helped me too, because I wasn't confident in the beginning about exploring in these areas. So I wanted her expertise and her consultation and just her support in this area. And she was so wonderful. And, I'd share these research papers with her, and she would, I've mentioned before, she would say, my professor at Harvard, wrote that. And yet they didn't teach us that when we were in the training program. So she was shocked that there was all this information that they didn't really promote during the curriculum for the endocrinology curriculum, but she understood it and read it, and we read it together. And so at first I sent my patients to her, and then she prescribed the GLP-1 for them, the Byetta, because I felt more comfortable with that, because I wasn't sure, is this right? Given their case. So I'd present the whole entire case, and she would say, yes, absolutely. And then at one point she told me, you can do this yourself. This is okay. You're on the right track. And through the course of my career, I've turned to experts in various areas to run things by them. I think when I have someone who's, say, a world expert on something, which I have turned to in the past for certain things, like the hypoglycemia issue that we deal with, and they say, you're on the right track and what you're doing is working, and it's actually makes total sense scientifically, and your protocols are correct. You're not imagining that you're seeing this. You're not, when they're that supportive, it really is very meaningful to me, because then I feel good about it. And so as a pioneering type of clinician, which I admit that I am, it's been really helpful to be able to turn to these world experts, when things are emerging that seem to be helpful in certain metabolic conditions, but they're not mainstream. And so it's really great to talk to people out there that are experts, whether it's in the research world or the clinical world. But the clinical world is wonderful if you reach people like that. So, and so that relationship was good for getting me the confidence of this GLP-1 and what it can do. And yes, it was a game changer, the Byetta, even though people would say, oh, it's weak, it doesn't do much. But if it's used properly, it can. And that's the key, I think, that people who are just now discovering the GLP-1s, one of the things that I think they may realize over time is that it's not a one and done. It's not just a simple thing that you have someone and they have an elevated body weight, and so you just prescribe a GLP-1 and that's it. That's really a superficial way to look at things, and I think that it'll end up being frustrating and disappointing to a subset of patients and providers, and they'll want to look deeper at what's really going on with my patient metabolically, and what's the best, as Andrea calls them, cocktail approach for the specific things that we're seeing.
So I know, like, personally with my treatment, like, I've been on pretty much every drug. Like you mentioned Byetta, you mentioned Symlin, I've been on those. And then Victoza, I've been on that. And we sort of changed drugs as things came out, and also just in the nature, in the course of treatment. But also some different testing things have changed too. Like we've done different kinds of testing. I know I have names for everything. I call it the eating test. I call it another one this test. But, because we test every 3 months so that we can adjust different dosages of drugs. And you, of course, record everything. We have amazing clinical records of everything that's happened to me and all your patients. But like, how has that changed over the past, 15 or whatever years?
Yeah, and that's changed a lot. And so if you look back, the first time we could get really a lot of insight on what was happening was actually about 20 years ago. So, I mean, that's a long time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
wasn't
it
just.
seems like a long time ago, but probably in the
Yeah.
medical world, it's not that long ago. But to me, it's like, oh my God, that's forever.
Yeah, because I feel like pre-2025, it was a frustrating period a little bit, because it was like I knew that there's this metabolic adaptation going on, and I knew it's not calories in, calories out, and I knew that there's hormonal changes, but you could read about a lot of it, but you couldn't clinically measure the things you were reading about, like leptin.
Oh, right. All those hormones.
Adiponectin, ghrelin, you couldn't really measure those. They weren't available as lab tests for doctors to run. And
those,
so,
just say that those, and also those are the ones that you want to.
yes. Well, and the funny thing, the interesting thing is, so during that period, it's not really the dark ages because it was still really enlightened, but it was like that matrix that I'm telling you about, based on a lot of other markers that are common things we measure. You could imagine what those things that you couldn't measure were doing, which is amazing. You know what I mean? Because they have so much influence. This is when we talk about metabolism. So, say leptin, we've talked about how leptin influences the reproductive system, it influences our thyroid hormones, it influences so many things. And so, if you see some things in the common lab work you can have access to that would indicate there's a leptin problem, then you put on your matrix, leptin problem. How do we influence the leptin problem, even though you cannot even measure the leptin? So that is how far the thinking had to go during that time frame when we couldn't order those when I couldn't order those tests. So I had to kind of imagine what might be happening with those things that we couldn't measure based on what we could measure. And that really reinforced the metabolic feedback loop, because by doing that, the patients made progress. By doing that, by targeting something that you could imagine was a culprit, without measuring it, but by inferring that from other tests that you could run, the patient made progress. So that was so encouraging, and it taught me that metabolism, metabolic science, and metabolic medicine is based on logic. It's logic and common sense. And so that made me feel so excited, because then it turns something complicated into something kind of not that complicated. It gives you a framework of how to work with this whole thing. And so then, but in 2005, suddenly, after begging the labs, for these tests, we could suddenly start ordering these tests on our patients. And that was super exciting. And so then we're starting to get the results back, and it was reinforcing what we were thinking, and it just further reinforced those strategies, and it enhanced the strategies too, because you could tell, well, if there was a leptin problem, was it because it's a signaling problem, or is it just suppressed, or what's going on? And so, not to get too technical on all these little things, but it's just trying to explain that there is a lot of science behind it, and these hormones really influence our metabolic system a lot. And so being able to measure more things gives you more confidence, a little bit more clear direction, so it saves time on, thinking that it's something and going off on a tangent that may be not necessary. So, but what's great is the most steadfast, solid treatment strategy ever, whether you can measure the hormones or you can't, is the nutrition foundation. Because the nutrition being secure strengthens those positive signals that we want to be strong, and it dampens the negative signals. So if nothing else, the nutrition is the key foundation. When I say that, I mean nourishing your body, switching to that fueling mindset. And for a long time, before we even had these fancy drugs we have now, our patients have made progress. I mean, we have some patients who've seen in our clinic for probably I know at least 16 years, but some even more. We have hundreds of patients that have been in the practice for more than 10 years. And so way back then, it's not that we had these fancy drugs we have now, but they still made great progress that by today's standards would be considered good, because they were focusing on that fueling to strengthen the things that they could. It doesn't always work, but at least you're trying to improve them, and using the pharmacology that we had at the time to improve what we were seeing in the labs.
And I think earlier you said pre-2025. We didn't have the test, but I think you meant pre-2005.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
2005.
Yeah, 2000.
2005.
So at 2005, and when leptin was discovered and all that, that was the big turning
Yes,
point.
2005 is when. Thank you for catching that. Yeah, that's when we could measure everything. So it was the 5 years before that was when I was making that transition from thinking that somehow this calorie in, calorie out could work, to realizing it wasn't working
Yeah.
and trying to get away from that and understanding, building that matrix. And then by 2005, when we could measure the hormones, it was filling in a lot of blanks in that matrix.
I'm curious, Dr. Cooper, how many, like as a percentage today, how many doctors would you say are still saying you should go on a diet, cut calories, exercise more, calories in, calories out? Because some of you listening around the world have written us emails, and your doctors are saying you need to eat less and exercise more. And do you have a guess, Dr. Cooper, as to what that figure might be? How far have we come?
Maybe like 10% reduction in that messaging. Maybe the GLP-1s have helped a little bit because I think what's helped is patients out there that have told their providers, look, I'm eating more than I was before, or I'm not dieting and this is working for me, And maybe the provider is starting to realize this a little bit, some of them. But I think it's still the vast majority are looking at it as though you have to be on these diets. But, as we're talking, it's kind of giving me hope because I'm thinking, well, before, as Andrea said, her doctors thought I was practicing voodoo or something by just using the pharmacology that today now is becoming mainstream. Maybe that's what we're going to see with the diets too. Maybe they think it's voodoo, what we're saying about this whole diet culture. And maybe in the future that becomes mainstream, that no, that's really not, what I always would try to tell people is it's not necessary. It's not necessary to do that. And it's potentially harmful. So let's just eat and fuel consistently. And maybe that's the advice that maybe a lot of practitioners will start giving in the future. And maybe it'll be sooner than we think.
I don't know. I think that there are a lot of people who are using the GLP-1, who are using, people using the GLP-1 to eat less. And I think that because it does suppress your appetite, I think that a lot of people are using it for that reason. I mean, I see it around town here that they take it so that they do stick to a diet. And when I hear about it, I'm like, that's not the reason that they invented this drug or that why you should take it. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but you're kind of doing your body a disservice.
Yeah, but I think the encouraging thing for me, and gosh, my wife and I have so many friends who are on GLP-1s now who've struggled with weight their entire lives, who've struggled with diabetes their entire lives. What I think is exciting is that how often we hear people say, the food noise is gone. I don't have to worry about eating anymore, and I'm eating on a regular basis, and I feel good, and it's so encouraging to me that it's so clear that these drugs are really having such a positive global health impact on so many people. And I think, Dr. Cooper, as more doctors see that firsthand, I'm hoping that they'll get away from the calories in, calories out advice. Because, Andrea, you've been on 30, 40 diets in your lifetime.
Oh, at least, yeah.
You've done the weight cycling, you've lost the weight, you've gained the weight, time after time after time.
Yeah, that
And
screwed up my
now,
whole body.
and now, like you said earlier, I
My
mean,
life is totally changed.
it's been like a
Totally
13-year
changed.
journey for you,
Yeah.
and you are a fraction of the previous Andrea physically
Yeah.
because all that weight is gone.
Yeah, and I just feel it is the weird thing to say, and it's so cliche, but it's like a freedom, because it's like I don't have to worry about that part of my life anymore. I don't have that like in the back of my head nagging, 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 like, ugh. If I eat this, that, if I eat this, that, like, I don't have to worry. It's like I have bites of everything because I love food. I love food. My life has revolved around food since I was born, pretty much. And I don't have to worry, like, that if I eat this, something's going to happen to me. It doesn't. It just doesn't happen. I eat whatever I want. And I mean, I'm a healthy eater, so it's not like, oh, I never ate like, I mean, maybe a few times, but I never really ate like bags of chips and a whole cake. I wasn't that person. So now I always have dessert because to me a meal is not a meal unless there's dessert. But I don't have to eat like the whole dessert. I just want some. And I have it. I have whatever it is. I'm a healthy eater. It just happens.
Yeah. It brings about a remarkable balance. I
And you
remember back when I had
and you
metabolic
feel
syndrome.
good about it, right, Mark? Like you feel
Oh,
good
yeah.
about eating.
Yeah. And the
You
fact that
don't
you,
feel bad.
right.
And that to me is the biggest inner change. And it's like there's this joy and a happiness about food that sometimes before you had like this guilt of like, oh God, I'm going to eat this delicious meal. And then, oh, I shouldn't have eaten it.
Yeah. It's,
Gone.
and think about, you guys listening, think about human beings love to worry. It's like how we're wired. It's it's why we're alive today. Our ancestors worried a lot about stuff. But when you think about the stuff that we worry about in life, whether it's finances or work or family or whatever, worry takes the fun out of life
Yes.
because it takes up mental energy that otherwise could just go to
Yeah.
enjoying life. And that's one of the joys of being treated for my metabolic syndrome is that there's, like you said, Andrea, there's an unbelievable freedom from worry.
Right.
And
Food
that,
is a joy.
so I remember back before I saw Dr. Cooper, I would go to the theater and I could eat like a whole tub of buttered popcorn, like a huge tub and a 32-ounce slushy, and still, like be ready to eat some more. And I was so out of whack.
Not now.
Not now. I mean, it's just beautiful.
No, but you have what you want and you love it
Yeah,
and enjoy it.
absolutely. And I
And then
think,
it's fine.
and it's not so much about how much we eat. It's as Dr. Cooper said, it's when we eat. We have to make our brain feel secure by fueling throughout the day and fueling exercise and just having a sensible relationship with food. Dr. Cooper, I'd love to know, before we wrap things up, we talked about the evolution of some of the medications, and we're really on the cusp of a couple of really big developments in metabolic drugs. Can you just give me just the bullet points on a
Yeah.
couple of things that are under development now?
Yeah. Well, we might see maybe the ones that are coming out sooner might be that orforglipron, which is that's the small molecule GLP-1 pill. And that one, there is an advantage. It seems to be performing in their clinical trials in terms of weight response, almost equal to Wegovy, almost. But the thing about it is it might be less expensive because the manufacturing of it is less costly and it doesn't have to be refrigerated. It doesn't
And no injection.
deteriorate. The pills, they're pills and they don't deteriorate. And they can be taken any time of day. They're not, you don't have to treat it specially because right now the only oral GLP-1 we have is called Ribelsis, which is semaglutide. So it's like Ozempic and Wegovy. But that is a very fussy pill because it's a peptide-based pill, and so it has to be in blister packs because it kind of dissolves or evaporates, and it has to be taken on an empty stomach with only a tiny bit of water, no food, no medicine for half an hour after. It's pretty hard to deal with. So hopefully the orforglipron is going to show just an ease of use and an affordability that's going to change things quite a bit, but it's still a GLP-1. And then with the Ribelsis, which is the semaglutide, they are probably going to be releasing it in a very high dose form, so it's more effective. So, and it will also get closer to the Wegovy response. And so, but it's still a fussy pill, will be more expensive. But right now it's only available at 14 milligrams, and they're going to be coming out with it at higher milligram strengths. So it'll be more effective. But those are the two that are maybe the soonest. But we do also have some others in the pipeline. You've got the Cagrasima, which is we talked about Simlin before, which is pramlintide, which came out in 2005. Well, this is the first reiteration of that type of a hormone analog, but it is combined with calcitonin. So it's confusing, but it's like a calcitonin amylin analog mixed with semaglutide. And so we've always known, based on past research, that combining the amylin with the GLP-1 does enhance, it creates a synergistic impact. And those studies were out, gosh, I think it was 2007, that the scientists in San Diego were describing this. So it definitely will be a good match. The one part of it, the calcitonin component, is a little controversial, but not really a concern. But there's a little bit of warning because calcitonin, which was also used for bone density in certain cases, it's been associated, not as a cause necessarily, but been associated with a little bit higher cancer risk. But nobody really has proven whether it's a cause of the cancer risk elevation that they saw in some situations. And again, it's a small increase. And so there's a little bit of caution warnings about using the calcitonin in this setting, but the calcitonin enhances the amylin impact. And so that's why it's in there. So anyway, that's another one, Cagrisema by Novo Nordisk, that is in the pipeline. And retatrutide, everybody's kind of excited about, and that one may be a little longer to come out. Maybe, I don't really know when exactly, but maybe next year at some point. And that's by Lilly. And that one is a triagonist. So that one, again, has three components. So it's the GLP-1 and GIP, kind of like the Mounjaro Zepbound, but then it's combined with a glucagon receptor agonist. Glucagon is an important hormone that helps regulate our glucose levels and things. And it's a little bit counterintuitive how it would work, but I can see a patient population in my own practice that I predict will do very well on that. So I think for certain patients, it may be very, very good. And that seems so far to be showing good safety and effectiveness. And so that one is also on the horizon. So I think those might be the most, upcoming ones. And there's one in process that's counterintuitive because it's, we talk about GIP, which is in the Mounjaro and the Zepbound GIP. That's a GIP agonist, so it's stimulating the GIP receptors. But there's one called Maritide, which is the opposite. It's a GIP antagonist, so it's blocking the receptors, and it also produces really great results. So that's another counterintuitive piece of all of this, is that stimulating or blocking that receptor is producing similar weight response results. And it has to do with the receptor sensitivity. And so it's complicated, but that's another one in the
That's
pipeline.
science.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in this field, and then there's some like emerging ones that are just being, I forgot how many hundreds or thousands that are being looked at, of combinations of different types of, they're, the popular term now in the medical field is nutrient stimulated hormones. And it's kind of like a catchy phrase, but it's basically referring to anything that when we eat, it naturally stimulates these hormones in our body naturally. And so they're trying to make those into these cocktail type, injectable weekly. But I believe, I can't remember, I think it's the Maritide that's going to be monthly, but one of them is going to be monthly. I believe it's the Maritide.
Wow.
Wow. Gosh, so the landscape is changing.
Landscape's changing.
Ever so quickly. But
You
look
got
at the,
you doctors really have to keep up.
Well, I just want people to know too that there's other tools in the toolbox besides all these fancy drugs. There's other tools in there. And so we don't want to overlook some of the older meds that now are going generic. We're pretty excited because now Saxenda went generic. Saxenda is liraglutide, same as Victoza,
Right.
but it's a higher dose. and it was originally marketed for weight, while Victoza at a lower dose was marketed for diabetes. So you can get the generic form of Victoza now. We found the lowest price is at Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Pharmacy, is the lowest price for the generic Victoza right now. And it's a good price. And so that's still a good drug. I have some patients who've only been on that drug and never had to change. They've made incredible progress on it. So I wouldn't poo-poo those older drugs. And then once Saxenda is available, then you can take that liraglutide to a higher dose strength. And the cost is supposed to be similar to the generic liraglutide right now for Victoza. So it may be another really affordable, more affordable option for people. But it's a good drug too. It's a daily injection. But for some of our patients, it's better to use those because they may be sensitive to the medication. And so if you use a daily injection, it has like a 12-hour half-life. So
Right. Less
that
puking.
means, yeah, it gets out of your system quickly if you have a reaction. And it's 98% bioidentical, the liraglutide. So it's really mimics our own hormone very closely. So anyway, I think we don't want to poo-poo that. And it's unfortunate that no one picked up the generic form of Bydureon, which was exenatide. It was the once a week Bydureon, which was the first once a week med that came out, and it was very effective. But no manufacturer decided to manufacture that. And same thing with the Simlin. It's been discontinued. There's no generic manufacturer for that either. So that's not available either. So as we've gone, there's been a graveyard of some of these that were very useful, but we can't get them anymore. But aside from just the GLP-1s too, we have other tools too. I mean, there's metformin if you have insulin resistance. There are meds that we give people pre-meals if they have problems with what's called hyperinsulinism. There's meds for the POMC pathway, like the bupropion and naltrexone. There's meds for the high famine signals in the brain and leptin dysfunction problems, like topiramate and zonisamide. And I'm just throwing these out there because the cocktail approach is what works better. And so that combined with no diets and just fueling strategies. So
Wow. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I'm so glad that we did this, Dr. Cooper, because there has been an evolution of thought. There has been an evolution of understanding. I'd love just a really quick takeaway from both of you before we wrap up. Andrea, what's your takeaway on from voodoo to mainstream?
Well, I don't, granted, I have a different doctor now, but they always look at my tests that I go through because I share all my tests. And all my doctors now are like, whatever is going on is fantastic. Keep it up. This is really great information. Like, they're always very curious. Like, my doctor now is always like, oh, I always look forward to see what these tests are and what these results are. Like, it's a way more positive reaction now when they look at everything. And they're always very interested in what's going on. It's just it's a slight skew in attitude now. And it's sort of like, oh, they look at it as like, oh, this is like another expert advice. And it's just very interesting to see the change in approach. And I feel like the attitude in general toward toward all these different types of like the attitude in the air of this type of approach that Dr. Cooper has totally changed. You know, you hear it sort of in the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
and it feels easier to deal with when you tell people what's going on with you.
Yeah. I think institutional knowledge is slow to change, whether it's psychology or astronomy or medicine. It's that institutional knowledge has inertia, and people who challenge traditional thinking are often ostracized. I guess my takeaway is, number one, looking at Andrea, your health. It's undeniable that what you've gone through under the treatment of Dr. Cooper works. It just is undeniable. And
There's no question.
And I'm glad, Dr. Cooper, that people aren't yelling at you anymore and hanging up the phone. And I feel like more doctors are reaching out to you because they're curious. And you've said that if we're going to look for a provider in this space, find a physician who's curious about your metabolic dysfunction, not dismissive, and certainly not
Right.
like they know it all, because those are really dangerous people if they think they have all the answers. And you've said before, Dr. Cooper, you don't have all the answers, but you do have many, many years of clinical experience and looking at the science. Dr. Cooper, what's your takeaway from this episode?
Well, I think that it's true that some of this voodoo has become mainstream now, what was perceived as voodoo before, and hopefully the diet culture will too, because that is a lot of why we're doing what we're doing here. And we're hoping to get this conversation going about this and hope that it just turns the clock a little faster towards this outcome of switching our mindset to the fueling strategies away from the restriction deprivation. Because if you look around, if you're a person affected by your high weight, you look around at people and you can, you have more discipline. You've been doing more diets, more kind of, tracking things, tracking your weight, tracking what you're eating, thinking about it, than people out there at a normal weight are doing. So how are they keeping a normal weight? So it's like, it does not make sense. It's not the reason for the obesity, And so, and then also, like Mark was describing, the Slurpee and all that, that's, at the time that I met Mark, you weren't even eating like regular meals and stuff, and you weren't having your breakfast, you weren't doing so of course you're going to want that Slurpee and stuff. And so it's like part of the fueling strategies for people of any weight is just to get, the normalized appetite signals, normalized metabolic signals. But while we want to emphasize healthy nutrition for everyone, because, nutrition is an important component of our health. We always say that. So we're not saying that it's not important. It is. But it does not have the power to reverse metabolic dysfunction that causes obesity. And people with obesity may have appetite receptor dysfunction. So they may feel like they don't feel satiated at times. And so it may appear that, well, you're eating too much or you're eating more than you should. But that's a symptom if that is the case. And again, not all people with obesity have these satiety issues or have food noise, because some of them don't have food noise, but they still will benefit from these medications because the medication gets to the root of the metabolism and strengthens our metabolism, which affects so many things, not just our appetite. So anyway, it's just a long way to say it's complicated, but I feel like we're moving the dial little inch by inch, so that hopefully what we're saying now about the diets and the diet culture will become mainstream sometime. And so we'll see.
I want to add one more thing. I think when you go to your doctor, I think smart people always want information from other smart people. So I think that in general. So I think when you go to your doctor, if they say, oh, that's interesting information, I would like to know more, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been so fun. Thanks you two for another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.